The first mistake that I see a lot of people doing with portraiture is getting really stressed out about achieving the likeness of the person that they're drawing and also making sure that that drawing is really accurate. And I think what ends up happening, you just end up torturing yourself the whole time. And trust me, I have been there. I've done so many portraits in my lifetime. It really is my specialty. It's the one subject that for me, I will never ever get tired of working with. I have to say that I think I like portraiture more than figures. I mean, they're both top up there for me, but I just love portraits. And so, what ends up happening if you're trying to draw somebody is you are constantly questioning this. Does it look like Benedict? I think it looks like him, but wait a second, what about that nose? I have to work on this. He's got that certain look that's so mesmerizing. And if I don't capture that, I'm a terrible artist. And so there's this inner monologue that I think starts to happen when you're drawing a portrait that is really specific. I don't think people do this when they're drawing other things. And I think what starts to happen is you stress about it so much that it completely distracts you from thinking about some of the important formal elements that are actually going to help you get better at it. And I think that for a lot of people, stressing about this never helps you. And just, does it look like him? Does it look like him? And getting really freaked out about it. So this is really a mindset that I think you have to take on to say, you know what? I'm going to put aside likeness. I'm going to put aside accuracy, at the very least for the first half of the portrait when you're first starting to settle the fundamentals. We've got some activity in the chat. Hello, 10,000 Crows and Lily Jones. And Hamza is saying the grid drawing system should be a cardinal sin. I am so on top of that, Hamza, because I don't like that system, that thing where you grid everything out, because to me, that's not really drawing. That's basically just copying shapes, and you're not really understanding relationships. You're not thinking about the structure of the head. So I totally agree with you on that one. And Lily Jones says, I've been looking like something like this for a while. Me or Benedict or portraits, because there's three things going on today. So anyway, let's take a look at what's next. So a lot of this, you guys, one of the just major issues with doing a portrait is that there's just a lot involved emotionally and psychologically when you draw a face. Like, okay, look at Benedict, okay? This is from the beginning of Doctor Strange, you know, when he's that like jerk doctor or surgeon. Actually, he looks really good. Once he gets all the shaggy goatee, I don't know, he's not as good looking. I like him better when he's like the jerk doctor in Doctor Strange. But it's like, okay, look at the two images. I know you can't compare the two. Granted, we're looking at some sweet potatoes compared to Benedict Cumberbatch. Oh my God, I'm sorry, Cumberbatch. And you just don't have strong feelings about peppers and zucchini. It's just not the same thing. So that's the issue, is that there is a real psychological baggage when you're drawing a face. It affects you emotionally in a way that a pair just is not going to do. Like when I look at this picture of Benedict, I'm like, you know, I'm free on Saturday. Husband said it was fine. You know, and then I'm not really thinking about drawing anymore. And that's problematic. So you don't want to have that level of distraction. Hamza saying it enforces a Xerox machine type translation. It encourages so many bad habits. And so, you know, if you just jumped in, Hamza is referring to the grid system of drawing, which I think usually portraits are what are most commonly used with the grid system. And I think what also bothers me about it is that it's all about the result. It's all about getting an accurate result. It completely shortchanges anything about the actual drawing experience. I mean, to me, it's not really a drawing experience, but in my opinion, when you make a drawing, the process of making it is just as important, if not more, than the final product. And I think that's what happens with portraits is people get just really, really hyper fixated on likeness, on accuracy. And that's like a death wish, you guys. Like that's not going to help you do better portraits. Let's see. Fentanyl says, felt this. I get so unmotivated painting still lives, especially when I can't work consecutively for very long. Yeah, doing a still life when you're in a class is really difficult because you just don't have a lot of control over the situation. But I'll tell you, we have a couple of tutorials on artprof.org. For example, we have an oil painting tutorial where I get to paint a lobster. This is the coolest thing. Like I always wanted to paint a lobster and I finally got around to doing it. And so really the key to making a still life interesting, it's in choosing the objects. Like if you give me, say, this cup, I'm bored like crazy. Like I don't want to paint this. I want to paint something that's truly engaging. So I think the key to getting a still life to be interesting is investing in objects that you genuinely want to paint. Okay, let's take a look at what's going on with tip number 2. If you are just joining us, we're talking about the top 5 mistakes that people make in portrait drawing. So number 2 is when people start the portrait drawing with the eyes, the nose, and the mouth. Because what happens a lot is people really connect with the facial features. When you meet somebody for the first time, usually you look at them in the face, usually you make eye contact. And so it totally makes sense to me that people think they should start there. But actually, it can really cause a lot of problems for you. So actually, if you think about Benedict, okay, who here has seen Sherlock? Okay, who here is like in mourning over that show? I'm like, how could you not keep this show going? Like, I'm visibly upset about this. Let me know in the chat if you've seen Sherlock and what your feeling is, because I feel very strongly about Sherlock not being produced anymore. Anyway, like look at this. Okay, so here we have Benedict, and yes, I know I love his face. He's great. But if you think about it, his character Sherlock, if you don't have the coat and you don't have the hair, it's like you're missing 50% of the combination. And so then when you go to the next slide and you put it back, it's like you're looking at a different person. And so I'm talking about the beginning of a portrait drawing. I'm not talking about like 3 hours in. I mean like the first 15 minutes, even that early on. You want to block in the hair, block in the neck, block in the shoulders. Like a lot of people do not do that. A lot of people will do the eyes, nose, and mouth, makes them look really good and finished, and then they will like build the hair and the neck and the shoulders around the facial features, which actually does not make a lot of sense because actually the facial features only take up a very small percentage of the head. It's actually really the head, the neck, and the shoulders that have the greatest amount of mass. And so that's why you want that to be the prevailing form. So if you look at this image, this is from a movie he was in, 12 Years a Slave. I don't know if you guys have seen it, but it's a hard movie to watch. Like, it's an important movie, and the topic is really riveting, but I just wouldn't watch it if you don't want to be like really upset and disturbed. But it's a good film. You guys should see it. But it's like you look at his character and look at how important the hat and the scarf and the jacket are. Those are critical to a portrait. Because I think what a lot of people say to me all the time, they're like, well, how come nobody is interested in the portraits I draw? And 9 times out of 10, it's because people don't give their portraits enough personality in terms of specifics. So for example, if you do somebody and they're not wearing anything particular and they don't have a specific hairdo, it tends to look very bland. But once you put something on them, then they really create a type of persona. Like, look at Benedict, okay? Just picture if we just whittled Benedict down to eyes, nose, and mouth. That's basically what you're doing. When you guys start a portrait drawing and you begin by drawing the eyes, nose, and mouth, this is what you're doing. I know a lot of you are looking at the slide and thinking, oh my God, that looks so dumb. Of course it does. But the thing is, when you draw like this, that is in effect the type of results because you're not thinking about the form. I mean, I always had this dream that one day I would get to teach a portrait drawing class that was long enough that I could squeeze in a portrait sculpture project. We do have this portrait sculpture tutorial on artprof.org and on YouTube that you guys can definitely check out, because I can tell you, I think when I really felt like I understood portraiture was after I started sculpting. Sculpting is such a wonderful companion to drawing. So if you guys have never tried that before, I highly recommend that you do it because it completely transforms your take on portrait drawing. Okay, so the issue with the eyes, nose, and mouth is not that they're not important, it's a structural reason. So if we look at my chart, the eyeballs are squishy little spheres. The nose is cartilage. The lips are soft tissue. There's nothing structural that actually holds anything up. And yet people spend all of their time trying to articulate some of these areas. So you guys in the chat, tell me if you are one of the guilty artists who usually starts a portrait with the eyes, nose, and the mouth. I'm curious, okay? And I'm not going to like grade you down because obviously I can't here. I mean, I can to my regular students, but tell me in the chat if you've had that experience, or if it's something you used to do, or if you're doing it now, because this is very common. I'm not saying everybody starts this way, but I see it a lot in a lot of different students. Let's see, in the chat, Hamza's saying, I had to make a self-portrait in plastilina, and afterwards, drawing a self-portrait in charcoal felt like it was so much more familiar with the forms. That's it. I could not have said that better, Hamza, because I really think that the mindset that I try to have when I'm drawing a portrait is I think about it like a sculptor. Like if you were going to sculpt a portrait of Benedict, okay, would you start by sculpting the eyeballs and then sculpt the nose and then sculpt the lips and hope it came together? You wouldn't. There's no chance that you would start it that way. So if you think like a sculptor, it can really, really help a lot. And so here's where the structural stuff really comes in handy, okay? These to me are the three most important structural forms on the face. For example, the cheekbones. They're called zygomatic arches if you want to get all nerdy, which I do, of course. And then the jawbone. The technical term for that is mandible. And the ear is not made out of bone, it's made out of cartilage. But do you guys see in my chart how the cheekbone, the ear, and the jawbone, they all connect? It's like a little intersection. So I always look for that when I draw a portrait. So I can say to myself, okay, well, if I find the ear, I know where the cheekbone is. If I have the cheekbone, I can find the ear. If I have the ear, I can find the jawbone. So I look for things like that in anatomy because a lot of people are very intimidated by anatomy. And what I say to people is, guys, anatomy is basically connect the dots. That's all it is. It seems very intimidating, but once you know the basic structure stuff, this is all that really matters. I know a lot of people who are like, oh, well, this overlaps under this muscle. I'm like, I don't care. I can't even see that. This is the stuff that really, really matters. Okay, Lahona is saying, this is amazing how much thought you have put into this way presenting the subject. So much information loaded and so relatable. Oh, are you a fan of Benedict, Lahona? And actually, it's very funny because I did a poll in our YouTube community tab, and Benedict was #1 because I listed Michael Fassbender and Hugh Jackman and Eddie Redmayne and Justin Theroux, and I didn't think Benedict was going to be #1. I really thought it was going to be Hugh Jackman, but who knows? All right, so Ronan Lesser is saying, focus on the video, goddammit. Okay. Lahona is saying, I start with the outside of the head, cheek to jaw and to neck. Okay, good. Yeah, a lot of people start in different places. I think the important thing is that you are addressing the entire form. If you are just picking at little pieces, that's when you get in trouble because then your face starts to fall apart in terms of the structure. By the way, if you guys want more in-depth anatomical information, because I'm not going to go into that here, I would go to our self-portrait drawing tutorial. It's on YouTube, it's on artprof.org, and you guys can get more information there on all that nerdy anatomy stuff. All right, let's talk about these structures and why they're so important, okay? Cheekbones, really, really helpful. And thank goodness Benedict has such chiseled cheekbones. They're so easy to see because on some people, the cheekbones are not that pronounced. And so sometimes they're a little bit harder to see, but his are like so visible. So it's like totally perfect for this. And then if we look at, for example, this is a drawing by Rembrandt. I mean, this looks like a squiggle. It looks like he did it in like maybe 5 minutes or something. But even a drawing that's this fast, it still captures everything. It still gets the hat, the neck, the slouch. And so I think even at this very early unfinished stage, all of these elements have to be in there from the get-go. Let's see. Hamza is saying, do you ever use gesture drawing in portrait drawing? I do, Hamza, and I have a couple slides coming up in a little bit, and I'll show those to you guys. Those are pieces that are from my sketchbook. Ronan Lusser is saying, what anchors should one use if someone has a lot of fat or something blocking out cheekbones and such? Well, the thing is, there are certain parts of the body called bony landmarks that are going to be visible even if somebody is very large, okay? So, for example, you could say, okay, well, the cheekbones are maybe not that visible, but you can still find the ear, and you can probably find an approximation of the chin. So the thing is, it's difficult because on certain models, some bony landmarks are extremely visible, and on other people, they're just a little bit harder to see. So I think the key to all this is you really have to know what you're looking for. I think that is the biggest problem when people draw portraits and they draw figures. They don't know what they're looking at. They look at the figure and they go, oh, there's a bump here and there's a bump there. But the thing is, you have to have the knowledge to know, oh, that bump is a muscle, that bump is a bone, and then you can organize the structure. Now, granted, that takes a while. That's not something you're going to learn overnight, but that's why I do think anatomy is very, very helpful. And we will be having some anatomy streams at some point, but today we're going to just focus on portraits. And so here's another thing that you miss out on. If you don't establish the hair, the head, the neck, and the shoulders, sometimes there's like a fundamental part of the gesture that you just are not going to capture in the beginning. Okay, so let's pretend we have this picture of Benedict, okay, and we just do the face, okay, eyes, nose, and mouth, okay. Then we go to the next slide and we realize, oh my gosh, he's like turning his head. There's this beautiful gesture with the way he's turning around that if you don't establish that gesture from the beginning of the portrait, it's not going to get easier as you go along. Because my firm belief in portraits is that you don't want to be adding stuff later because it really feels like an afterthought and it oftentimes doesn't feel very well integrated. So I really think about things as being like having like a placeholder almost. It's like you're not ready to really draw the shoulders yet, but at least put a little mark there so that way you know about where you want it to be. Because I do think for a lot of people, when you're drawing a portrait, like the first 70% of it is all approximations, and it takes a long time before you really settle down and commit to certain areas of the form. Okay, and by the way, all of this is really important in terms of drawing the figure, but I think if you guys want to go beyond just drawing a face, you really want to think about composition. And so I really recommend that you check out this video, which is on our YouTube channel. It's how to compose a portrait. Because that's another issue with portraits is that people say, oh, well, it's a portrait. There aren't that many options. So I got to stick it in the middle and do a face-on view, and that's the end. But that's not true. There's a lot of different ways you can organize and place a face on a page to be very unusual and different. And so if you guys want composition tips, I would watch this video because there's a lot of good tips in it. Okay, the other thing too is if you have motion in the neck, oftentimes it says a lot about the person's character. Like this is a beautiful charcoal drawing by John Singer Sargent, and it's of the ballet dancer Nijinsky, okay? Now, granted, I've never seen Nijinsky dance live or anything like that, but even if you look at this portrait and you know nothing about Nijinsky, you know something about him from looking at this portrait. It's very theatrical. It's dramatic. And look at that neck. I mean, that neck is like really ridiculously long. I mean, it's totally anatomically incorrect, but it suits his character. And so that's where I really want people to get away from the accuracy thing, because the thing is, this drawing is not accurate, okay? I'm sure if we took a photo of Nijinsky, he would not look like this charcoal drawing. But the difference is that this drawing feels like Nijinsky, theatrical, dramatic, really beautiful, bold presence. As long as that comes across, that to me is the most important thing. I really could care less about accuracy. Hamza says it's not an art prof portrait video if there's no mention of John Singer Sargent. I'm sorry, it's hard to talk about portrait drawing and not mention John Singer Sargent. He's just quintessential portrait painter, and he does what he does so freaking good that, oh man, it's just hard not to talk about him. Let's see, Abdullah is saying my biggest problem is to get the proportions and the references right. My sketches don't look anything like my reference. Well, okay, my feeling, you guys, about proportions is that a lot of people think that the face has to be measured. And so, for example, if you go online, you'll see lots of proportion systems. People will say, oh, the distance between the two eyes is equivalent to this, and this is 3/4 of this. I've seen a million systems like that. And really, you guys, the trick to good proportions in figure drawing and portrait drawing, it's none of those systems, okay? Because the thing is, like, okay, guys, look at this. If we go here, and let me go back actually to a Benedict picture, because he's a weird looking guy, which is such a strange thing because he's so mesmerizing, but it's like, he's not really your typical, like, hot Hollywood stud. Like, he's a little strange looking, but that's sort of what makes him extra attractive. But the thing about somebody with unusual facial proportions, those measurements don't work on these people. Like, could you guys picture trying to measure out Benedict's nose? Like, I just feel like that would be so ridiculous. And so really, Abdullah, what it has to come down to is measuring with your eye. So what I usually do, here's a measurement that I use a lot, that a lot of my students usually don't get right away. And so this one proportional relationship that I talk about is that on almost everybody, the mouth is always wider than the nose. Now, I don't know how much wider, it depends on the person that you're looking at, but that is a basic proportional relationship that I like to look for. But then other things that are not quite so clear, I'll say, okay, well, how wide are his eyebrows compared to his chin? How tall is his nose compared to his forehead? It's all a series of relationships and comparisons. And if you guys get really good at measuring with your eye, you can say goodbye to all those proportion systems, because honestly, it's so much faster and more efficient to draw based on observation. And if you really train your eye, that's 10 million times better than any proportional system that exists out there. Okay, so let's go back. And this is a Watteau drawing. And you can see this one too has a very dramatic turn of the head, okay? And so things like the neck become really, really important. I think the neck is really underused in a lot of portraits. I think a lot of people think of it as just, okay, it's this thing that supports the head. But it's much more than that. It really dictates motion and movement and like beautiful muscles. Like, this is one of my favorite muscles in the whole figure, which is a sternocleidomastoid. It's this like V-like muscle that attaches at your pit of the neck. It goes behind your ear. And it's such a dramatic muscle in the neck that I don't see how you could have a muscle that gorgeous and not want to just totally exploit it like crazy. Okay, let's take a look at this Rubens drawing. So this is sort of encapsulating what I'm talking about having everything in place from the get-go. You can see, looking at this drawing, certainly the facial features are more developed, but the hair is all there. I mean, it's barely there. There's just a couple strokes, but it's definitely there. And that's the important thing, is that you hold the place for those sections. Hamza saying in the chat, it's the same way with composing still lifes too. Saying in your head, the vase is halfway higher than the glass and things like that. Yeah, because you know something, those measurement systems, you guys, they're really slow, they're tedious, and I've never really seen anybody measure like that and come up with a drawing that truly had energy and movement, because I tend to think that actually the drawings that are more flawed tend to feel more naturalistic, because when things are too perfect and too measured, there's a certain degree of artificialness that comes along with that. Okay, before we get on to the last three tips, I would like to let you guys know that we have this event coming up. It's a portfolio critique marathon. Myself and the rest of the Art Prof staff, we are going to stream live for 8 hours straight. And we are going to critique your portfolios. And so you should think about submitting your portfolio. All you need to do is just make a one-time donation of $4, and you want to submit your portfolio link to us by next Monday, January 13th. And in theory, if you guys want to, you certainly can purchase a critique anytime you want, but I can tell you we charge a little bit more than $4 usually for these critiques. So you might want to get in on the marathon. If you want information on that, it's on the front page of artprof.org. Hamza's asking, are the portfolios all critiqued by all of the staff that's present? Okay, that's a great question. We have several people critiquing, and we are going to do one person at a time, because if I critique for 8 hours straight, I'm going to die. So usually we'll do like Lauren will critique for an hour, and then Jordan will critique for an hour, and then Kat will jump in, and I'm going to be the anchor. I'll be coming in and out. So I'll probably jump into a bunch of the critiques as well and have my own 1 hour session, but it's going to be a really fun event, guys. We're super excited. So check that out. Okay, moving on. Mistake number 3. Getting in and drawing the details too soon on a portrait drawing. I think the thing about details is that details are usually what impress people. Like, have you guys ever heard somebody say, "Oh my God, the details are so good"? It's like, that's the type of thing that people get impressed by, because it's easy to latch onto, it's quick to recognize. But actually, in my opinion, the much tougher part is really simplifying the form, establishing the structure. And if you do a great job of that, doing the details should be easy. I see details as like putting sprinkles on a cupcake. It's that easy. You just drop them in. It's the baking part that's a lot harder, because you mess that up, you're not going to have a very good cupcake in the end. Let's see. Tammy's saying the portfolio critique marathon is going to be so much fun to watch. Yeah, we're joking around, because a lot of us have not stayed up that late in a really long time, because we are starting the critique marathon at 8 o'clock at night, and we're going to finish at 4 a.m. And I think it's been like over a decade since I've stayed up till 4, and we'll just see what happens. Should be very entertaining. So one of the reasons why people dive into details too early is because they want to make their drawing look good. And that makes total sense to me. Everybody wants their drawing to look good. I do. I'm sure all of you guys in the chat want your drawings to look good. Nobody wants their drawing to be bad for the most part. That's not what you're trying to do. But what happens is that people jump the gun. They start putting in details when the basics have not been set up. So for example, you could look at this image and be very impressed by, oh, look at that nice little soft piece of Sherlock hair. And then look at his beautiful eyelash. Like, those are all things that are very easy for us to latch onto and to really notice. But the thing is, those details are going to completely fall apart if they don't have something really holding them in place. So I would just say, when you guys are drawing a portrait drawing, really delay the details. It's not something that you want to do early. I mean, for me, if I were to break it down, the details for me are like the last 5% of the drawing. The rest of the time is like building up form, thinking about shadow, lighting, anatomy, structure. A lot of that goes on for a long, long time. Hamza's asking in the chat, can we request a specific staff member, like when someone purchases a portfolio? Great question. For the critique marathon, you can't. One of the reasons why is because we don't know exactly how many submissions we're going to end up with, and so we don't know what the timing is going to be like. So we didn't think that that was a good idea, because we didn't want to make a promise that we couldn't keep. However, Like I said earlier, if you guys do decide to purchase a critique, those you can absolutely pick whoever you want. And it's great because our staff has a very broad range of expertise. Like if you guys are a comics artist, get a critique from Kat Huang. She's an amazing comics artist. I would not be good for a comics critique. I could do it, but I would definitely not be remotely as knowledgeable as Kat. So definitely, if you do decide you want to purchase a critique, read the staff bios because everybody has a very different area of specialty. Okay, so let's get back to details. And the thing is, details are not the whole show. Okay, like I found this really nice picture of Sherlock, and it's like this is not a super detailed photograph of him. In fact, the whole background is super blurry, and he actually looks more like a silhouette, if anything, because he's wearing that awesome Sherlock coat. He's got that like beautiful, luscious hair, and it's a pretty monochromatic image, but it really has like atmosphere. Like I don't know, like what do you think he's thinking in this picture? Like he just looks really like, I don't know, deeply immersed in thought, which I suppose is sort of the point of his entire character. But I'm just saying that a drawing doesn't have to have detail to be a good drawing. In fact, I would like to show you guys some examples of that. This is George Seurat. Some of you probably know his painting is that very famous painting, Sunday in the Park with George. And it's funny because I actually don't really like Seurat's paintings that much. That's my personal taste. I'm not saying he's a bad painter. I'm just saying he's not really my cup of tea, but I love his charcoal drawings. Like this is a drawing that he did of his mother. And does everybody see when you look at this drawing? There's no details. There's no eyelashes. There's no pattern in the dress. You can't see individual hairs. It's this like haze of shadow in the portrait. And I think this is a beautiful drawing. So details don't always take care of everything. Now, if you look at portraits, I think what happens a lot, especially with the eyes, people get very fixated on certain parts of the eyes that I think are more easily noticed. So if you ask somebody to draw an eye, usually what they'll do is they'll draw the upper lid, the lower lid, and then they'll go in and they'll like color in the pupil, okay? Because the pupil is very clear and very easy to see. But the thing is, in a face, the pupil actually is one of the least important sections of the face, and it's also one of the flattest parts of the face. So actually what matters much more is the eye socket. And the eye socket, it's a little bit confusing because there's a lot of stuff going on in there, okay? You've got the eyebrow, you've got the eyelids, you've got the shadow and the connection to the nose and everything, but it's like eye sockets are deep. I mean, if you guys ever look at a skull, like they're huge. They're not like really small. The eyeball is actually very small, and I feel like by comparison, the eye socket is like the Grand Canyon. So it's a very dramatic form, and I think a lot of people don't realize how dramatic it really is. Let's see. Hamza's saying the Seurat portrait reminds me of your etching portrait series. Yeah, can you tell I looked at him? Just a little bit. All right. So if you look at, for example, this is a beautiful Kathy Kollowitz self-portrait, okay? Again, like that Seurat drawing, this is not a very detailed drawing. The most detailed part of this drawing is actually the wrinkles in her forehead. And if you look at her lip, you don't see any articulation of the skin. There's no eyelashes. Even the eyebrows are just like two really quick marks. But guys, look at how cavernous that eye socket is on the right-hand side. In fact, it's so dramatic. Doesn't the eye almost feel like an afterthought in a way? But that's where the eye socket does its job. Because the eye socket is so dramatic and bold, the pupils in the eye don't have to work very hard. And so that's what you want. You don't want to have to like totally belabor the pupil and the eyelid. Like if you just get a really strong, bold sense of eye socket, that will totally take care of it for you. Here's another Kathy Kollowitz portrait. And I love these. I mean, they're really, I think, harrowing self-portraits. If you don't know a lot about Kathy Kollowitz, she was one of the German artists, and she was living during the time of Nazi Germany, and so it was not a good time to be an artist. And she suffered through a lot in the war, And I just find her portraits just absolutely mesmerizing. They're very emotional pieces, and yet they have almost no detail compared to, say, a lot of other things that you see in other places. Okay, now if you look at, for example, this is a Michelangelo drawing. This one's a lot more resolved and a lot more detailed and tight than the Kathy Kollwitz one that we just looked at. But look at this. He's got his cheekbone, he's got his jawbone. Michelangelo knows his priorities, okay? He's able to build those details because he has the fundamental structures in place. Let's see, 10,000 Crows is saying, this one kind of reminds me of one of Tim Burton's drawings. Oh, I can sort of see that. I actually really like Tim Burton's drawings a lot. I feel like I saw some book on his like character sketches. They're really great, but I don't know, his movies have not been so hot lately. I sort of feel like Edward Scissorhands was his last good movie. I don't know, maybe that's up for debate, but that's my opinion. Okay, so the key really, if you want the forms to work on a portrait, you have to draw stuff that's around the eyes, nose, and mouth, okay? Eyes, nose, and mouth are important, but they're just one piece of the puzzle. And between the two, I think that the forms around are much more important, because what you see a lot in portrait drawings, you know how sometimes you look at a portrait and the mouth looks like it's just floating there? It looks like it's not actually like on the face. Or if it's on the face, it looks like those like, you know, those like wax clown lips that people wear around Halloween? Like they just look too harsh, like you could just pick them off the face. And so the question is, how do you get the eyes, nose, and mouth to really like sink into the face so things feel very massive and very connected somehow? So you got to draw what's around that area. So an example, this is a really cool Van Gogh drawing, and I feel kind of bummed for Van Gogh because he's so well known for all those sunflower paintings and obviously Starry Night and all his portraits and everything. And those are fine. I do think that obviously it's very oversaturated imagery that you just see everywhere. But I don't think a lot of people realize how amazing his drawings were. And the only reason I know about his drawings is because I was living in Boston many years ago and they had a show of Van Gogh's work, and like half the show was all drawings. And I loved his drawings. His drawings, I think, they're a lot more honest and less flashy than his paintings. I mean, this is totally subjective. I mean, this is my personal opinion, but if you look at this drawing, Old Man with a Top Hat, do you guys see how, again, the mouth is like barely there? It's really the structures around the mouth, the chin underneath, the two pockets on the side of the mouth, the way the cheekbones pop out. The eyes, again, like Kathy Kollwitz, are barely in there. So that's really exciting. By the way, those of you who are watching, can you guys jump in the chat and tell me where you're from? And also maybe tell us when you discovered us. Did you find us yesterday? Have you been watching for many years? Because it's always so interesting to me, number one, how people find us and whether they've been watching for a long time, because we actually started the site, we launched in 2017, although it took me a few years of prep work before we actually launched. But it's funny for me to think now, like, wow, we do have people who have been watching us for many years. We also have people, somebody said to me yesterday, I just found you today. So it's always interesting for me to think about the timeline of how people find us. Let's see, Irma Vazquez is saying, for someone who's just starting in portraits, how important is lighting? For example, should someone try to portrait with harsh lighting or try natural lighting, or does it even matter? I'm so glad you brought that up, Irma, because I think lighting is absolutely critical for a portrait to really work out well. Because if you don't have good lighting, you're not going to be able to see the shadows or the form very well. I mean, it's to the point where if I am drawing a person and there's terrible lighting and it's like a long-term drawing or painting, I will either get a light and do it myself or I'll go do something else. Like I can't deal without lighting. But actually what I would do, Irma, if you go to our YouTube channel, I did do a stream, I think it was like 2 weeks ago, about lighting, and I actually used Michael Fassbender, my other white male celebrity crush, and I talk about all of those aspects. I talk about natural lighting versus artificial lighting. I break down the different types of shadows, reflected light, direct light. So just look for Michael Fassbender somewhere on our YouTube channel. It's a pretty recent video. You should be able to find it. And I will try to put it in the video description below so you guys can find that later. Okay, so let's see. What you want to also avoid with the mouth, try not to trace the outline of the lips. I understand that impulse because a lot of people look at the lips, they just think, oh, okay, it's this one big form, let's get it knocked in there. But again, it's the same thing. Like if you just trace the outline of it, they end up looking like they're just floating on the surface. So instead, what you guys want to do, start with the line that's in between the lips, because that's structurally the more important thing, is to show the separation of the upper lip and the lower lip. If you don't do that, if you just draw around it, it's almost like you're squishing the top lip and the lower lip into one form. And you don't want that because they're very clearly separate forms and you got to treat them that way. Okay? Assuming you don't have this yucky Doctor Strange goatee. Ugh, I don't know. He looked really good when he was the Doctor, but like the whole Doctor Strange look, I mean, I like hearing him, but the thing is, he has a terrible American accent in that movie, and I just feel like that's the biggest waste of his like wonderful British accent. Let's see. Okay, so someone from Toronto found us yesterday. Someone's from NYC. Oh, you've been watching us for years. Someone from Chicago found us last year. And Jeremiah Taylor from Toledo, Ohio, go to boarding school in Michigan, found us for portfolio advice. And Philippines a few months ago. Wow, very cool, you guys. Thank you so much for getting in there. It's really great to hear all that information. Okay, so we go to the line between the lips, and then on top of that, you also want to draw these pockets on the side of the lip. And this really is what makes the difference between lips that are floating and lips that are actually in the face. This is a great example. Actually, Irma, who is talking about lighting, like look at the lighting in this. The lighting is beautiful. Gorgeous shadows down the middle, beautiful highlights coming in on the left-hand side and the right-hand side. I mean, I would not want to do a portrait without lighting because it's almost like you're shooting yourself in the foot. It's like you're starting out flawed if you don't have a good lighting situation. And so anytime I'm teaching drawing classes, I spend a while lighting the models because I know that if I don't set up a good lighting situation so my students can see the form, they're going to have a really hard time with their drawings. And I don't think that's such a great idea. Let's see, Melissa saying from Lima, Peru, and following for over a year. I love your videos. You're a great teacher. Oh, thank you very much, you guys. Thanks so much for showing up and listening. Okay, so tip number 4 for top portrait mistakes is drawing exclusively from photos, okay? Now, I could probably do a whole stream about this, but I'm going to try to really sum it up in a nutshell. I don't have problems with people drawing from photos, okay? I draw from photos. Lots of our staff draw from photos. It's an indispensable tool as an artist that you should absolutely use. It's there. Like, how can you not do that? At a certain point, it just gets ridiculous. Like, if you're a freelance illustrator and you need to do a drawing of Chartres Cathedral, what are you going to do? Fly to France? No. You're going to go online, you're going to find a picture. You have to do that, okay? Now, there's lots of degrees of that. I mean, I think if you need to draw a banana, there's no reason to Google banana. And I have seen that. That's not something that has not happened before. But I think the key thing with drawing portraits is that you learn how to do both. You train yourself to draw from life. And in doing so, it makes it easier and better for you when you draw from photos. I think the problem I have is when people just totally say, I will not draw from life, it's too inconvenient, it's not doing what I want, I can't draw what I want to draw. I disagree with that. I think that if you want to be a really versatile artist, you really have to know how to do a lot of different things, and it just keeps your options open. It's like, why would you limit yourself to only being able to draw one way when there's so many different other ways out there? For example, a lot of people could look at the hot jerk doctor that Benedict played in Doctor Strange and say, ooh, this is like 2 for 1. Like, if I want to draw portraits, I can practice drawing it. I'll just do these drawings of Benedict because that's great. I can just like stare at him at the same time because, when you're drawing, you have to really look at things. And I would not have any problems doing that with Benedict right now. But the thing is, that just sounds a little too good to be true, doesn't it, guys? And if something sounds too good to be true, it's because it is. Do you guys remember the scene in Sherlock when he was crying? Oh my gosh, he's so good. He's such a good actor. Oh my God. So here's the thing, guys. You can absolutely draw from photos. You should do it, but build a foundation of drawing from life. Now, here's what happens is a lot of students say to me, well, hang on, how am I supposed to draw portraits from life? I don't have a model who's going to pose for me. None of my friends will do that. Well, you don't have to do a super long, involved, finished drawing to get better at that, okay? So for example, these are just some really quick colored pencil sketches that I did with my daughter. She was just like looking at her iPad. And this is probably like, I don't know what, a 5-10 minute long drawing. They can be very casual. This is another drawing of my daughter. She's just sitting there. And sometimes I'll even just like sketch her at breakfast and stuff like that. So I think a lot of people think that, oh, well, if it's a portrait drawing, it's got to be some big involved thing. It's got to be a drawing that I work on for 6 hours and I get in all the details and everything. I love doing these quick gesture images of heads. I think Hamza was asking about that earlier in the stream. And so the idea is to really just diversify your skill set. Like, here's a very funny page. So this is basically, I went to my daughter's band concert and they had an orchestra there as well as kids, obviously. And sometimes you're sitting there and you're just sort of like, oh my God, what do I do with myself while we're waiting for the concert to start? So I oftentimes bring my sketchbook and I'll just sketch people around and everything. I just started drawing the kids that were in the orchestra. And they're very funny because you just start noticing things about people that you normally would not notice. Like you start seeing that, oh, that kid holds their neck a certain way. And oh, she's tilted a little bit. And honestly, it's such a great way to pass time when you're like sitting there and stuck and don't have anything else to do. And these are really fast sketches. These are ones that I do in like 5 minutes, and they're just really great practice. Now, what I would suggest you guys do that and then work on self-portraits, okay? Not because you are an egomaniac and want to draw yourself every day like a modern day Narcissus, but for practice, for observing form, for setting up a lighting situation, and go back and watch that self-portrait tutorial because I do introduce how to do all of those things. So you can do all those things, but don't work only from photographs. Learn how to do both. So Irma is asking in the chat, is there a balance between drawing from life versus photo versus using your own imagination? Would that have more of a positive or negative effect to portraits? I don't think that there's any formula for how to do that. I think what worries me is when people start saying, oh, well, I don't want to draw from life because it takes too long, or I don't know who I should draw. And people make all kinds of excuses for why they don't want to draw from life. I mean, I get it. Drawing from life is harder. It's so much harder than drawing from a photo. In a photo, things have already been decided for you. And I just think that the other issue is that when you just print out some random stock photo of a person online, there's no personal connection there. Like you can't really get into that. Like actually, the stream I had yesterday with Kat Huang, Kat had these hilarious drawings of her high school drawing teachers. And they were really funny. Like you could not make up these facial expressions. They were so good. And so I would much rather do a sloppy, messier drawing of somebody who really has personality and character than have a photorealistic, accurate drawing of some person I have no connection with. So I would just say, Irma, mix it up. Try not to do only one for too long. And if you jump between the three and just keep things fresh, once you start feeling like you're just drawing the same thing over and over again, and you feel like, oh, I know what it's going to look like before I even get started, that's a sign that you need to get up and do something else. Okay, so Hamza is saying, how do we submit a portfolio for the live stream? Okay, so what you want to do, Hamza, go to the front page of artprof.org, and there's a link, it says 2020 Portfolio Crit Marathon, and that should get you there. If you can't find it, you can message us on Instagram or something, and we will definitely get that to you. And Tammy is saying, sketch from life. When I was in the holidays, I found it difficult to sketch people who are moving, but then just tried to make up the rest of the person in my head. Yeah, I think that there's a certain degree of that has to happen. I mean, this girl that I was sketching at the time, she's playing her violin, okay? But sometimes when you sit and you look at somebody you're drawing, you can actually like draw them for a little bit, wait for them to go back to the same pose, pick it up again. And then that's sometimes why I end up drawing 3 drawings on the same sheet of paper, because I sort of jump back and forth between the 3 portraits. And that's another fun way to do that. I think that those flaws are a good thing. I actually don't tend to like portraits that are like super accurate, because then I'm like, let's just take a photo. It's a lot faster. Okay. Top mistake number 5, drawing the hair last. I don't know why everybody does this, but this is really, really common, especially when sculpting a portrait. So again, people really prioritize eyes, nose, and mouth. They really get into all the details and they just don't even touch the hair. And I don't really understand that, because hair really matters, you guys. Who here saw Doctor Strange? I'm curious. Those of you guys in the chat, tell me if you saw Doctor Strange. You know how his hair goes through this like really big transformation? Like in the beginning, he's this like super uptight, jerky doctor, and he's got like really slick, like perfect hair. And then he goes like crazy because he's all upset. He starts growing a beard. His hair is really yucky and greasy. And then he like shaves his goatee. And then it's like, whoa, now he's Dr. Strange. So it's like the whole thing about hair. Hair has a story. And hair is so much a part of people's identities. I mean, I don't feel that my hair is that dramatic, but I still sort of know the silhouette of my hair. And I feel like for a lot of people, it's a huge part of who they are. And so I don't think it's a good idea to focus on the face and say, oh, I'll do the hair later. You can't do that, because eventually what ends up happening is that you lose the mass of the hair. Like, doesn't this lady have the weirdest hair? It's like very strange. Like, she almost looks like somebody tried to like sculpt horns into her hair. It's like a very odd hairdo. But it's like, if you picture this charcoal drawing without this shape hair, it's a completely different person. And so I would argue, for structural reasons, you want to put the hair in early on, but also just for personality reasons. Like, how could you draw somebody without their hair for many, many hours and hope that that personality is still going to come across? Like, you really got to think that through. And that really becomes visible in portrait sculpture, because when I took portrait sculpture classes, people would do this all the time. They would sculpt a portrait and have them bald for like 80% of the entire sculpture. And then like the last week of class, they would throw hair on top of it. It always looked bad. It was not pretty. And what you would end up with is just these people who end up looking like they have wigs, just like Benedict here. Like, there's something so artificial about it. It's like you feel like you can just like peel that hair off of their head. And that's what's going to happen in your drawing if you leave the hair for the last minute. Don't do that. Get that hair in early on. And you can see that's what Peter Paul Rubens did. This drawing's nowhere near finished. I mean, it definitely has a lot that needs to be done. I mean, everything's sketched in there. But look at how dynamic the hair is. It's so exciting. And it's like, how can you leave that out? It's so, so important. So guys, don't think a portrait is eyes, nose, and mouth. It's not. There's so many other things that I think are definitely involved. And you got to just treat all those things all at once. Equal importance. The chin matters as much as the cheekbone, as much as the eyebrow, as much as the hair. It's one big cohesive package. And that's the most important thing, is that you think about it as a single form. Okay. If you guys want to grow as an artist, I would suggest that you subscribe to our YouTube channel and you ring the bell to make sure you guys don't miss out on anything. We do offer artist mentoring. You can purchase a portfolio critique or a Skype session. I know a lot of people really feel like they need customized support that's specific to their own needs. And I want to thank our Patreon supporters: Johnny McLahona Rampton, Ross Hines, Tammy Dreiger, Sally Webster. Thank you guys. You are really keeping the lights on for us because we rely entirely on donations. And by the way, I hope that you guys will explore more of our related videos because we have the self-portrait, drawing and crayon tutorial, we have the portrait sculpture tutorial, and also that portrait composition tutorial that I mentioned earlier. So check out some of those videos. Thank you so much for watching, and I'll see you next time.